this is a conspiracy. That's what this is.
Just begging to course its way through your veins.
Let's just for a moment speculate, shall we?
You're into comic books, aren't you?
I'm a nerd.
But you do like comic books.
Comic books aren't just for sad nerds anymore.
Do you think we need one more?
Strange things are afoot at the Circle K.
Do you think we need one more?
Objection, calls for speculation, move to strike.
This is a bad idea. This is a bad idea.
All right, we'll get one more.
Speculates, a comic book podcast with Jake and Jesus.
What's going on, spectators, and welcome back to another rousing episode of What's That Squishy Feeling in My Shoe? Wait, I'm sorry. I'm very sorry. Wrong show. I meant Spectales. Welcome back to another episode of Spectales. You may remember from previous episodes, I'm the host with glasses, not to be confused with Cyclops, and digitally sitting next to me once again is a man whose beard has counted to infinity twice. That's right, I'm talking about Jesus. What is going on, Jesus?
Look, man, the beard is dope, but I kind of feel shafted in this intro just because Cyclops is a very cool X-Men. Like, who has the best beard as a mutant is what I want to know.
I don't know. Facial hair. Well, yeah, Beast. Well, Beast has the chops for sure. But I don't know. I don't know about facial hair. Gambit. Gambit's got
Old Man Logan.
Old Man Logan is a solid one. But yeah, maybe that's probably for a list for another episode. If this is your first time joining us for Spectales, thank you for giving us a listen. Spectales is a comic book podcast that asks collectors and creators, what's your Grail tale? Each week, we explore news stories about the comic book grails we love, the epic journeys behind how they were obtained, and how they inspired new creativity.
We also dive into some comic book speculation and how, as collectors, we can help the hobby pay for itself.
Now today, Jesus, we're going on a small adventure, and luckily for you, I'm giving you the option of choosing one item to take along with you in this adventure. So here are your options. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay, Darth Vader's iconic red lightsaber, a 20-sided dice, or a D20, a longsword, or Wolverine.
And you gave me two sword options, so I'm assuming I'm going to be chopping down a lot of stuff, but I'm a gambling man, so I'm gonna pick the D20.
Sorry, the right choice was Wolverine. I'm sorry. But in the end, it really doesn't matter because on today's episode or journey, we're bringing along a guest who can masterfully wield all of the items listed and then some. He is the incredible author behind some of the most iconic stories and characters of the last decade. From Star Wars to Uncanny X-Men to Die and Once and Future, he is currently writing on Immortal X-Men and always rolls a nat 20. He is Mr. Kieron Gillen. Welcome to the show, Kieron.
I'm very glad to be here. I've got multiple questions in my head already. One, what is in your shoe? Two, it's like, if I'm always rolling a nat 20, that's just I'm cheating. Like, I just feel unethical if I think I roll a perfect bell curve of all numbers.
Well, good.
They're the two things I've got so far.
That's true, but wouldn't that be fun? I mean, that's the cheat code, right? Like infinite lives, and you always win. You always get the 20.
And like the whole, we're diving off the deep end, but like the whole history of dice is about like, does the gods love you? That's what those get. But any game involving dice is basically you've got a period when they really believed in the full-on God is interacting with everything. So kind of God loving you is a skill. So like that part. Obviously, if you're only rolling 20, it implies that, I don't know, Zeus or whatever's really looking at you and really paying attention. And that's probably a bad thing because I've read enough Greek myths to know the gods aren't really going to be good for us. So that's what I'm worried about now.
If you're favored in the rolling, that's
exactly,
pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Well, as far as we're concerned, your writing is certainly favored, but that's maybe neither here nor there. Kieron, thank you very much for joining us. We have been wanting to talk to you for quite some time, being big fans of not only your work within the big two, but also your independent work with Die, Once and Future, Rock Paper Shotgun. Is that?
Yeah.
Now what? Can you talk to me a little bit about that one?
My prehistory, I was a games journalist. I mean, I was a journalist about a bunch of stuff. I was primarily known as a games journalist. for like 15 years. Like, I mean, well, like at least 12 years full time. And towards the back end of that, I was one of the people who co-launched the site Rock Paper Shotgun, which is like a PC games website,
Oh, okay.
which took off. It took off. It still exists. You know, we sold it at some point in the early 2010s, and it's still going today. Like it's a major PC games website we made out of string. You know what I mean? It was literally just me, three mates, and a lot of favors actually, really, in this kind of like, because you know we've been around the block, so people knew us. So it's like, you know, I knew enough like major developers to sort of, hey, let me interview you, because they seemed to like me, which is like I was a very pretentious games journalist is the best way of describing it. You know, I was like, I took it seriously, and developers tend to like people who take it seriously. You know,
That's amazing. So to me, it's crazy that like I very much just think about you in terms of your writing and all of that, but you really had this not entirely, right? Like it's still within kind of the same creative space, but a different, you know, faction of it, I guess. But you had this whole other life built up in that world, which is incredible to me.
Yeah, honestly, it's a weird. My career is weird. Like my background, I worked like my dad was a builder. I worked building sites as a kid. I've got a pretty Irish working class background, and like I ran a very hard away from it. So I worked very hard to make sure I don't have to do real work. But like, yeah, like it's a weird one. I do joke like my I don't think I'm allowed to talk to some of the children of my wife's friends who like want their kids to be lawyers or whatever. And it's like the career of being I played video games for money until I got bored. Then I decided to become a comic writer instead. You know what I mean? Like that's not a career path. That's not a career path. I feel I've cheated. As you say, maybe you're right about the natural 20s. You know.
Well, yeah. I mean, you never know what happens next as well. What the next career choice is going to be. We hope you stay a writer for a little bit longer, though. We're really enjoying it.
I mean, it's weird. I've been like, even when I was like a critic, I was still a writer. That was the kind of thing. It's like, oh no, I know what you mean, but like they're just very different parts. Writing's a big space, and I'm aware that like for my entire adult life, I've sat behind a keyboard and tapped it. You know, that's literally what I've done. And what I've actually been doing has changed. But the reality is, I'm just there like the dog meme of the key.
So, do you still game on PC? Like, do you still? I know you had some favorites out there, and I think you had a favorite game developer, and I think he's coming up with some things coming up here in the future. But do you still do it?
Not as much. Like the real truth is, like I sort of dropped out of hard AAA mainstream gaming. Like around, I was doing Wickdiv at that time, sort of just after my dad died. Like, and I got into board gaming more then, and then I got in the next few years, I got more into pen and paper role playing games. So I'm always gaming. It's different parts of gaming, but like I sort of drifted out, and partially because I had so much work, and partially because the PC games I really love are stuff like like Baldur's Gate 3. Baldur's Gate 3's just come out. I would have been all over that, but I don't have 300 hours to sit by myself. Like, you know what I mean? Like my wife would divorce me, like, so at the moment that hardcore PC gaming doesn't fit the shape of my life anymore. But like, I went through a Marvel Snap addiction for about 3 months. Like me and Al Ewing played a lot of Marvel Snap, and I just went on holiday briefly, and the holiday broke my Marvel Snap. I was playing, I never quite got the top level, but I got like 98 or something, and then went to sleep, and I could have got to 100 that night.
Incredible. All right. Well, Jesus could probably continue talking to you about video games for the next hour, but we really don't have that kind of time, nor do I have the patience, because I have a lot of questions with regards to comics that we need to get to. And so that's going to lead us to our first segment.
Recent pickups.
That's right, the recent pickup segment where we're going to talk about something we recently picked up, collected, or read, one of the above. Jesus, you always kick us off, so go ahead.
Light week this week. Usually has some stuff I've been reading. I've been reading a bunch of stuff, but I want to talk about something else. I never win stuff. I wanted to use a die because I'm a gambling man, but I never win anything. So I finally won something online. I entered a little, raffle or something like that for one of our buddies. And I actually won this Secret Wars number 2, 9.8, the first appearance of God Emperor Doom. And I won it, man. I've never won something. And it's from Pops Attic, who's the Mark from Legion of Comics, his dad, and he had a collection since 1963. I think he had a comic shop too at one point, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know.
That's cool.
But either way, he has his Instagram, and he did a little raffle, and lo and behold, I won it.
Jesus
So I'm very
walks away a
my
winner.
my luck is turning around. I'm gonna win on this episode as well because I never win. So this is my recent pickup, Secret Wars #2 from 2015. First appearance of God Emperor Doom 9.8. I think it's a really cool book, and it's joining the PC now.
Congratulations. Very nice. Now,
Thank you.
Kieron, I'm going to put you on the spot here. I know you don't know a lot about the tater tot rating system we have on this show, but how many out of 5 tater tots? How many tater tots would you give Jesus on that one?
I'll give 4.
4. That's
Let's
a
go.
solid
4 out of 5.
answer. Yeah,
That's the
good.
most. That's the most I've ever gotten.
That
Thank
is-
you.
Really?
Thank you.
That's
one of my friends' podcasts. They give a rating system, review games, and no matter what game, they always give it 7 out of 10. Like, which I still think is a funny joke. Like, no matter how good or bad, solid 7. Anyway.
I always get 3. I always get 3 out of 5 tots.
Jesus has
no.
never actually won this the tot system here, but 4 tots he might win today. That's a tough one to follow. Kieron, I'm gonna let you follow Jesus though. Do you have a recent pickup to share with us today?
God, what have I picked up recently? I've barely left the. I tell you, like, I've barely left the house, and the only time I've done is actually like I went to Gen Con for the first time, like
Okay.
so like the
Ooh.
big gaming con.
Yep.
So
Mhm.
like can I say like I picked up Wonder Home there, like the collector's edition of that,
Yeah.
which I've got.
Yeah.
Annoyingly, it's not right by me, so I can't wave it in my direction. But it's a beautiful, shiny edition of J Dragon's like game about like what animals having a nice wander and being very friendly, but they've got a real sad undertone to it, and it's
Oh.
incredibly beautiful, incredibly atmospheric. Like I was really glad to get the fancy hardback edition. Like so yeah,
Nice.
that was really nice to have. You know,
I
just,
know.
yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Is
nice.
it-
Honestly, there's so much interesting in the RPGs right now, and there's all different aesthetic spectrums. So, like, yeah, that was a fun one to get.
I think that sounds perfect. That sounds like a recent pickup to me.
How was the Gen Con experience? Your first time? How was it?
Interesting. Have you ever done it?
No, I have not.
Like gaming cons, like obviously very much like Comic Cons in lots of ways. You know, lots of people, lots of stuff for sale. But gaming cons, especially, I mean, the board game RPG cons, they've still got this aspect which they're about people coming to do the thing. Like as comic people, we come to buy the thing, or occasionally to watch watch something. But like here, that's what comics cons are about. Gaming cons are about we gather together and play games. So like as well as the floor, you've got this sprawling space. Like the Indianapolis Colts stadium is next door, and they filled the floor of the stadium with gaming tables. So they got like on, you know what I mean? Like that's an amazing. You walk in and you see that as a vision. And it's got a very different kind of vibe in that way. So it's fun, you know what I mean? Like it was, and it's nice to go to a place where, obviously, I'm known because I'm a comic creator and I'm notable as a comic creator, but I'm also like completely alien terrain. I don't know anything. Like I'm wandering around confused, which is fun. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, that's exactly what I was gonna say because you've obviously done your fair share of comic conventions, so you kind of know the ins and outs of that. But going to something that's not that's not your bread and butter, I guess. So it's like not your mainstay anymore. It's the role playing, which even then you did die the role playing game, which is pretty cool as well. And that's pretty interesting. And I was gonna ask too. I guess you mentioned that in comic conventions you don't do the thing. Would that be something to add to comic convention in the future, like a brainstorming session between creators or something, or create something on the go that was created at that convention? I think that'd be pretty cool.
I'll tell you, that's probably like too. I must say, I'm thinking about I haven't done an actual Comic Con since before COVID, because of COVID and a bunch, and also just I've had a kid like a year and a half ago, so like that there's a lot of time I don't have there. I'm thinking about what I would do at a new con. So what I want to do is like a bunch of make weirder panels, like pitch a bunch of interesting ideas for panels where people could actually have something they couldn't get like just on a podcasts are great, but quite a lot of panels are kind of like live podcasts. Yeah. It's like it'd be fun to do something we could just do in the flesh. So I'm trying to work out something that. The thing that I loaded, in fact, I was just chatting to a friend on Monday. I was chatting to my friend Rachel Stott, the comic artist, about the idea of a comic book creators retreat, and it'd be great to have like a day before, after a con, and not like the Marvel retreats where you're planning proper stuff. It's like let's just get together and like talk about what we're doing, or like what's interesting, what have we learned in the last year, and sort of generally chill. And not with like audiences, but generally just for the creators. I think that would be really good in healing. I'm aware like there's so many of my friends I've lost contact with because I have not been out there for 4 years. You know what I mean? So that's what I think I'm missing. And it'll be, I say that though, I've been saying that, and other people have been saying that to me for like 15 years, or as long as I've been in comics. So will it ever happen? Probably not. But it's still a nice idea.
No,
Yeah,
that's a great idea.
But the actions involved, I agree. There's I went into a local shop on, I think it was this last Saturday, and I went in and I was looking for a specific book, which unfortunately the shop didn't have. But the coolest thing was, on a Saturday night, this shop is basically divided into two. It's a large space, and half of the shop is set up just for comics all day, every day. But they have this side room, which they basically just bought out the other half of this building. And on Saturday night, there were at least 40 or 50 people in there, just table after table, playing different games. And it was fun to see. And I play games, but I don't necessarily get involved in a lot of the community game spaces like that. But it is really interesting the way that you put it, where it's very active, right? That community, their cons, that of course they are just giant conventions to go and play games with other people. And I think that's an incredible way to put it, because yes, Comic Cons, people interact, but we're buying stuff. I'm sure you're buying stuff potentially at those gaming cons, but the participation, I hadn't really considered that. That's probably one of the biggest draws to those cons. So very cool. Great story. Great recent pickup. I'm going to go with 4 1/4 tater tots awarded to Kieron. Very nice. Very nice. Hey, Zeus, you were so close to winning this, but yeah. That's so. For my recent pickup, I've got one that you all are going to be familiar with. I went back and revisited one of my favorite series, one that was actually initially recommended to me by a friend of the show and another comic podcast, Lance from Comic Book Keepers, highly recommended this to me. And he was like, "How have you not heard of this yet?" And I still don't know how. I went back and revisited Die. Kieron's fantasy heartbreaker story, but the thing was, it's funny because the first time I read it, and then the most recent time where I read it within the last week, I read all 4 trades. Emotionally, it changed for me a little bit. I've changed and grown since I read it the original time, and I really enjoyed it. The first time I read this, interestingly enough, was a lot more. I was actually just having finished playing D&D with some old. I had started a D&D group with some people I used to work with, and we had gone through. We had played through COVID and stuff, and we basically fell out, and the game sort of fizzled. And that's where I had picked this up the first time. But I have not played D&D since, and upon second reading it, the part, honestly, I mean, I loved all of it all over again, but I have to say the part that really hit me the most was the part where Angela has to say goodbye to Case. And here's the thing, in April of 2022, something like that, I had a dog of 15 years that I had to put down, and no, thank you very much. It was so hard because it was really the first real dog. I had dogs as a kid, but when growing up, they just sort of went away. They weren't my dog. This was my dog. And so weirdly enough, after rereading and all the pages and all the gorgeous art and everything and all the cool story arcs within this, the thing that stuck with me the most, like, I had to put the book down after I read that part. But honestly, I think that is a compliment to you and your writing and the artwork and the emotions, because you really touched on something so personal to me that you had no idea, but it was really the exact same feeling. And so that's my recent pickup, recent reread. But I guess I really wanted to use it as an excuse to talk about this book for a quick minute. Can you, with all the characters, I mean, there's so much fun stuff, but then also really serious emotions that all of your lead characters are going through. Everything from the the night. Now I'm my brain
Matthew.
blanks. Yeah, my brain blanks when I get nervous. And when asking you about it. But can you tell me? Are any of these people based on real people?
Based is a strong word. I tried occasionally get people who inspire people and you take in different directions. And these, I must admit, they're less inspired than many of the books that I've ever written. And normally, if I'm inspired, I'm normally taken from several places at once, and with normally with a strong twist. I guess to die, I was rearranging stuff. That's not a good way to put it. I was thinking about me as a 16-year-old. Who were the people I knew? What were they like? And then of course, what else could they have been like? So what was that? What was our specific dynamic? How do you take something a bit like that dynamic and change it? And there's a line that almost every writer says this. So I'm sure you've heard it before. But you say all my characters are me. Because that's stating the obvious. They are all of you, and and that's the thing. Quite a lot of you with the dials turn, as in.
Yep.
I mean, I can be both the hero and the villain in the story in the sense of okay, let's take the worst part of me. Let's turn that up. Let's remove what few redeeming parts I have. Suddenly you've got a monster. And let's take what makes you kinder. Let's take the stuff which, when you have done the good things, stuff where you've stood up for people. And then suddenly you've got a hero. Or at least you've got something you root for. And that's kind of a bit. So there's bits of me in all that cast. Or at least there's bits of dynamics I have seen play out in my life. But it was very much me I wanted with Dies, but with Stephanie, the idea was a straight ahead fantasy adventure being fun. I wanted to do basically non-genre material, in a genre story. So in other words, it's about losing your dog.
Yeah.
It's about, what I mean? That's and say having to say, I mean, of course we had to, I think the major influence of that bit where we lost our cat. We had to basically the cat had we're always gonna lose the cat because the cat had a heart condition. So she was always kind of gonna die early, and she just hit this moment. She just came in one day and clearly had a stroke or something. Sorry, I'm going to apologize for anyone listening to this. We had to go and essentially we ended up putting her down, obviously, because she was and having to go with her and say goodbye to her in that process, and where it was all happening, and that also the weird nature of having to be an adult with that, as in this is an awful thing we're doing, but it's the only thing we can really do. That responsibility, that's what I was trying to write about there, and all the stuff throughout, Ash's relationship with children,
Yes.
Ash's relationship with gender, Angela's relationship with addiction and pain into people around her, Isabel's, I used to be a terrible person. I acted in ways I thought was bad. How can I, have I got that part of me tamed? So what I mean, so trying to write real people, but put them in a fancy environment to turn the dial up. You know what I mean? So that was the idea of the book.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you asked whether they felt like real people, because that's kind of the hope.
It was, to me, it was clearly the humanity you brought into the fantasy world. The human moments, losing a dog. I was going to bring up Ash's fluid gender throughout the book, and how I can connect to it in in 2023 after reading it years before. But I guess just hitting me differently at different times, it makes me want to feel like, all right, now I need to go back and reread this in another year or so and see what I get again, right? But it's rare for me to put a book down. And I don't mean that negatively, but like I said, to be so emotionally, I've been emotionally impacted by books where I'm like, oh man, that this is good writing. But when you hit me right through the heart in that moment, I was like, I'm gonna go to bed. I think I just need to take a break. I just need to go to bed. And it was great. Now you did quasi squash my follow-up question, which was, I was gonna ask which character you feel like you resembled most. And maybe you're in all of them, or are you Saul?
I'm definitely all. Tell you what, Saul is where the original inspiration for Die was. Me and my stop me if you've heard this one before, anybody. But I was hanging out with Jamie McKelvey, the Wicked artist, and Ray Fawkes, the amazing comic writer artist, and we are just talking nonsense about the 80s D&D kids cartoon.
Yeah.
And the joke, they'll be in their 50, they'll be pushing 50 now, and whatever happened to those kids? And that stuff.
Yeah.
And then I was having dinner with a bunch of image creators at night, and it was still sticking with me. And I realized why it was sticking me, because I was afraid there was part of me disappeared into a fantasy world at the age of 16 and never came out. How has that hurt the people around me? How has my love of all this stuff emotionally stunted me? And then I burst into tears because I'm a big crier. But then I realized, oh no, that's something real. That's a real emotion. I can write into that. And Soul's kind of the word, like Peter Pan as sociopath. So
Oh,
you know what I mean? Like, so Soul's the worst portrait of my fear about myself. So yeah, but so's Ash. But Ash is not the worst fear, but Ash is a very different part of me, and the conversation between Soul and Ash is absolutely critical. So like, yeah, Soul is. I could definitely see why people would say Soul was the most me in it, but I don't necessarily think that's always true.
And I don't mean that from a negative. Like, I don't see you as evil, but the creator, being the mind, wielding the story. That's where I saw the connection.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, like, it's definitely there. But I'm also really aware of other strong influences in Soul.
Yeah.
In terms of like, Soul's not something, because Soul's I remember like certain friends of mine who seem better than me.
Okay.
You know what I mean? I know I say that, and I know I don't mean it. That's me as a kid thinking that.
Yeah.
And Soul, there's that concept of it's less of an American trope, I think, because you don't see it in American teen movies as much. But in the UK teen movies, you regularly have this sort of golden child who's very good at sports, also very academic. And the idea you were a jock or a nerd wasn't really as much the British thing. And I guess and Soul in my head is a bit like that. Soul isn't that American nerd idea. Soul's more like this weird charismatic cult leader.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, he's like, obviously he's a total nerd, but he's not like the pop culture's idea of a nerd. In the same way, like, actually Ash was similar. This is Stephanie's idea. Stephanie made like Ash a long-haired metalhead, because that sensitive metalhead is not something we think about in pop culture. Yeah, it's always like Wayne's World or whatever. But there was that guy at college who was always painting stuff on the side of their folder. You know what I mean? That very sensitive, like that very almost too gentle for the world sort of vibe. And you don't see that person in pop culture, and that's kind of where Ash's like visual "When on Earth" came from. That kind of stuff. Like, let's try and write people.
That's pretty awesome.
I could certainly talk about Die for hours with you, and just kind of diving into each individual characters. I won't go into that. That's kind of where I'll put a pin in it for now. Maybe we'll revisit it later. But I gotta say, just because of all the emotions that came out during that part of the segment, I'm gonna have to give myself 5 out of 5 tater tots. So normally I don't win when we have such an illustrious guest, but in this case I take the victory. I'll take the W. That said, after the win, all we can do now is move into our next segment.
Grail Tale. Grail Tale. Grail Tale. Grail Tale. Grail Tale.
That would be the Grail Tale segment. This is the one where we're going to ask Kieron here if he has a comic book grail or a collectible or any form of a grail that, I guess, the way we would put it, Kieron, is outside of your family, of course, and any pets or anything like that. If your house is burning down and you can only save one thing, what are you taking with you, and what means so much? Why does it mean so much to you?
That's really it. We're trying this, but we started as in like, in terms of the Grail, it's like I'm not a huge natural collector. Like, I love, like, I don't have much I don't have much actual art, and it's telling that I've only ever bought 2 pieces of comic art. I've been given stuff, which has been very kind, but I bought Kill Your Boyfriend, a page of that by Phil Bond and Grant Morrison, and I bought a page of Enigma by Pete Milligan and Duncan Fegredo. So I've got 2 pages of that, which are like, and they're 2 books which really influenced me in terms of like, as in terms of when I was basically coming in, because I came into comics as an adult basically, but in that period between going in full, that late 90s period, these are the kind of books I found absolutely compelling. But I think if I had to grab any, it's almost like I want to grab a single comic. It's kind of what I do. This is the one which has the most story behind. I think I would be very tedious and grab my copy of Watchmen, as in my original copy of Watchmen. Now, I'm going to have to show it you because it is probably behind me.
There's a lot of books back there. We haven't talked about the book wall yet, but
Here
we
are.
Holy
this
crap.
is well loved, as people would say.
Yes.
Well loved.
And the narrative, like, I got into comics as an adult, but the first time I lived in America for a year. I thought as part of my degree, I was a scientist, and I was doing biology research. and I had to get what's it called, a visa. So I basically went to the American place to get a visa, and I arrived like 2 hours too early or whatever. So I go and sit in McDonald's on Oxford Street for like 2 hours. But I've got nothing to read, so I go into I think it was a Virgin shop, which is like which was like a shop there, and nose around, and I see a copy of Watchmen. Now I don't read comics, but I read the music press. I'm aware of like culture, and I know I should have read Watchmen. I've just never seen a copy before. So I go buy this copy of Watchmen and go sit in McDonald's for like these 2-3 hours waiting for the place to open and read it from cover to cover. And it's like it's an explosion in my head. And I take it to America. I take Watchmen and a bunch of existentialist like philosophy, and like I'm in this place, no TV. This is before internet at home. This bed sit in America, and I've got nothing to do, and I'm too depressed to read the actual philosophy. So I read Watchmen like 5 times or whatever in these first 2 weeks of this in America, like because I'm also in the middle of nowhere and I don't drive, so I'm really isolated. So I read this, and of course, Watchmen's a book designed to be reread. So I'm reading and falling ever more into it. As oh no, this does this, and this does this, and this does this, and this does this. It's absolutely the kind of becoming Dr. Manhattan vibe of it all. In terms of, oh no, I see the connections. I see all the time and space. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like, and then I met a guy who I became a friend with, and he was a big comics person. He lent me a load of stuff across that year. So in terms of like the single comic, which was like, oh no, this book literally changed it very specifically. This volume changed my life. Not just reading a comic and liking it, but specifically the incredibly intense relationship with this bundle of falling a piece of papers. You know, so I guess this would be the single object I would have to take. Yeah,
that is awesome. How serendipitous.
That has to be it, right? And for all you listeners, the book that Kieron is holding and showing us that we're in awe of is because it is, he says, well read, and that is true. But the cover is falling off, the pages are falling out. I can't tell if the pages are like ripped or if he has notes in there. I'm not.
Yeah, it looks like he has notes.
Some are ripped. Definitely, some are ripped. There's some sections which are together. Yeah, it's not. I will send photos to put on the site or whatever.
Yeah, we love it.
Yeah, this is basically a montage now. You know, it's kind of.
That's incredible. That is so great, and that is the epitome. Kieron, you said earlier you were a little bit nervous about the Grail tale. Man, you knocked it out of the park. That is it. That is the Grail tale. I don't know that we've had Watchmen on the show. Nobody's really talked about it. I know I did collect the first issue at one point. I think I used that for a recent pickup, but funny, you know, I can relate to you a little bit. Watchmen was a book that I did not read until I want to say probably 2008-ish. Was when I read it for the first time, and it was a used book given to me by a coworker who said, "You haven't read Watchmen yet?" And I was like, "No, should I?" And they're like, "Yes, you should. Here, take my copy." And then when I went to give the book back, which was, I'll admit, months later, too long. But when I went to give the book back, he said, no, that's your copy now. I bought myself a new one because I wanted to read it again after I gave you mine. I was like, okay, great. So I inherited it. So that, again, that would be certainly a high up on I still reread that book regularly just because of how, like you said, like it is a book meant to be reread, and you find those threads, you find the pieces of the web, everything happening all at the same time. I do find myself thinking about that. But your story, man, that's incredible.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. One of my favorite quotes ever in a comic book is Ozymandias saying, you know, I triggered it 20 minutes ago. You think I'd let you stop me? Like,
took a mic drop in it. It's like, you know, I'm not a public serial villain. I did it half an hour ago. I did it 20 minutes ago. That's like a mic drop.
Of
course he's got it memorized.
Actually, if you Google, there's a lecture I gave, like it's called something called Watching the Watchmen or something. I did a lecture about how Watchmen tells its story. And there's a pretty good video recording and edited version of me breaking down Watchmen's techniques and in terms of what it does, how stuff you may not have spotted, its influence on the medium. So like if anyone wants to Google that up and watch it, I think it's pretty good. Like I haven't watched it for I did it about a decade ago because a friend of mine asked me to explain Watchmen to them. And I just thought, I'll do it as a public thing.
Nice. Well, I'm gonna have to. Yeah, we're gonna have to go back and find that. Correct me if I'm wrong. I can't remember it specifically, but is Doctor Manhattan quoted in Die? Do you use it as one of the quotes on one of the chapter pages?
I don't remember. I don't think I do, or do I?
I honestly, for some reason it rings a bell in my head. But
quote, I think we've got an Alan Moore quote, and I think I used an Alan Moore quote about fantasy.
Maybe it is Alan Moore.
It's tricky because I've actually got a list of. I collect the quotes for Die. Like if we ever do any more Die, I've got infinite more quotes to use.
Oh, you do?
So it's like at the end of every issue, it's like, so as I'm doing research, if stuff pops out, I'll stick it in the folder, and then I come at the end of the issue going, okay, which one should I use this time? You know what I mean? As in which one best echoes what this issue's doing.
You just said something incredibly interesting to me, and that was if we do more Die. Now I have to ask: are you going to do more Die?
Like you never know. Like it's sort of, you know, if you've seen the collector's edition, we've got you know, the hardback omnibus.
Yep.
We put one on the side, and that's future proofing. It's like there's probably room for more Die if we wanted to. You know, we did the RPG, and the RPG is explicitly building off the end of the comic, so there's definitely room to do it. And I've certainly got some, you know, like if you see as the comic, we haven't explored all of Die yet, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So like, maybe. I mean, like, I don't want to say like definitely, because I don't like people sitting there going, you know, like hanging on. But like, I think it's feasible. If it is, it would be very different though. It's the same way, like in some ways, Die is a bit like Phonogram, which was like my first comic I did with Jamie, as it's specifically a device to talking about RPGs or humans' relationships with games. Is the better way of putting it. And the same way Phonogram was about how music shapes people. This is about how game shapes people. So like, if I had something else to say, yeah.
Well,
yeah. So
I'm gonna be hanging on anyway. Sorry, Jesus, but he said not to hang on, but I'm gonna be hanging on for more Die anyway. So thank you.
So I did want to ask just real quick before we move on. You mentioned a couple of times of like working with collaborators, and can you kind of give a little bit of insight into your process from inception of a because you've talked about themes and then like meta and also like when you do Marvel work you're doing one thing, but when you do creator own you're doing something differently because that's you distilled your idea more. So can you kind of like just on the craft, how does your idea come from idea inception, and then how do you flesh it out a little bit? Like you can use Die as an example if you want.
It's like, it's really tricky, isn't it? Like I wish I had a better answer, because normally it's a question of like me and Stephanie were talking about doing something for a long time. So it's like she did the last issue of Journey into Mystery, which was like probably my best Marvel book up to that point, and she killed on it, and she did all the covers. And it was like when I saw that issue, it's like, oh, we should probably do something else. And we were already friends by then. So it's like, we should do a fantasy book at some point. And she did some issues of Wiccan Divine. So that's always in the back burner, as in like, you know, let's keep this relationship going and see what else we do. And eventually that died. And I was kind of working on another idea. In fact, two other ideas before I got to that one. Like, and to us, there are two ideas I might go back to as well, but they didn't feel quite there yet. And then when Die arrived, it's like, oh no, this is it. Like Stephanie will make it'll be more than just like a retro world. It'll be a Stephanie Hand's fantasy world. And the idea that she's the artistic collaborator who would actually visualize that world in a completely different way. Because part of Die is fantasy better than reality. It's also about nostalgia and loss and like sadness. And there's a real sadness and romanticism to what Stephanie does. So, when you like, if Jamie did Die, I would have to be thinking it from the ground. I cannot imagine Jamie drawing Die because it's designed for Stephanie. It's designed as a collaborator and an aesthetic spectrum, and that's kind of the vibes. It's always like, what can we do together? I mean, the metaphor I always use, because I'm me, is bands. I think comics is a bit like forming a band. So like, I'm probably I may set the direction for the band to begin with, but I want input. I mean, the thing about Jamie, they always ask, would Jamie influence the story? And the answer is not really. But he always about the execution of the story. Like I brought him a lot, and he added to it, and we had long conversations. When I wrote a script, we spent a lot of time on direct message with each other, chatting about ideas or how we could take different panels, that kind of stuff. So that's kind of like, it's a really, and that's why it's hard to generalize, because you're forging an individual relationship. And there's other creators have a more distant relationship, like and not in a bad way, like Dan Moore. Dan's amazing, but Dan really just needs the script like the script reference. Like in fact, Dan's been to the UK, I think. So there's a lot of reference specifically for like maps and areas and making sure it feels right. And he'll send me the outline, the roughs. I'll give feedback on the roughs. We'll tweak it a bit, and it'll turn out great. We don't need the tightness, but still, like Stephanie, you want to be hand in glove. Like the scripts are more like conversations, and even then, so like I actually do a masterclass about writing comics. I use Jamie, Stephanie, and Dan as my example artist to show the script, because the scripts just they share some similarities, but they're also fundamentally different. As in, because you're doing a script for what the artist needs. I mean, for example, with Stephanie, it's like, it's like a conversation, but also Stephanie is like the ocean. I describe it like Jamie's like a machine. He's like an amazing techno DJ. He's got this beat to him, while Stephanie is literally like collaborating with a storm, because the storm's going to do what the storm wants to do. But you want to inspire. So like that, especially with Die, you're making a world. So like we have all this world building here. I don't even just world building, ideas. Like there's this one panel, which I use as an example, where basically issue 10, I think, of Die, where they basically have the dictators, where the castle where they make new dictators and train them. And I write 3 ideas where you can set it. Like one, and 2 of them are drawn from the Brontes fiction, like their children juvenilia, and one of them is entirely new. As you could do it, set it here on the coast, like this Philosopher's Hall. 2 on the top of this sort of mountain in the middle of a town, or 3 basically anywhere. We just need a triangle. And so this goes on for like the entire page. But then, as well as giving her the options, because I don't really, the story doesn't change where it is. Just what inspires you, Stephanie? Go for it. But at the bottom is big triangle building, middle of nowhere. Because the what too long didn't read as well. So like, as well as the big picture, you also want this is what we need though. Because the problem is like doing it too broad. You create it too broad, and you don't stress what is required. And that's the difference between what wants and needs. So like, it's not, I mean, trust, I'm just starting a new project with a new artist who it's not announced yet, and I'm calling it Project TPF at the moment, because like its name will come out soon. And I've just passed over the carrot. Probably the first step we talk, a couple of things, and the first step is, and this is what happened for Stephanie, this was happened for Jamie, I think it happened for Dan. I write like not a full Bible, but like a character Bible. I said, okay, these are the main characters. This is their deal. This is what they're about. This is like, what they should look like vaguely, but definitely room for like building on there. Go. So I hand this thing to the new artist, like 6,000-7,000 words, like for the 6 characters, like, short, like 1,000-word bio. I mean, that's still quite a bit, but really let them get to know them. And then we're going to build from there. And that's, and the artist will start sending me sketch ideas, and we'll build and we'll create something personalized. Because I'm like, there's some books which, like, say Uber, like Uber's a machine. Like, it's very much like it's got sort of like World War II tech. There's no real, there's design work there, but it's not, you've got to try to stay faithful to it, because it's got to be in some ways boring. Because it's like, what I mean? It's part of it is meant to be boring. Conversely, like Wick Div is about making the new coolest kids on the planet. They've got to sing, you know what I mean? They've got to look amazing. And luckily we had Jamie, who of course that's what he does. Seriously, like there's no one answer, and that's part of the fun of it. Like the reason why comics is exciting for me is that you get to build a relationship from scratch. And it's kind of, okay, how are we going to do it this time? And at least part of the reason I worked with Stephanie after Jamie, because they are completely different. And I wanted to, I'd become quite good at doing one thing, I think, but I have to stop that and try something else. Because
challenge yourself.
Exactly, yeah. Otherwise, you just atrophy.
So I have a question on that too, because you didn't mention, I guess, Marvel for the most part, and this is a question I've always had. Obviously, those characters are long-standing; they have how they look for the most part, but there's also changes that certain characters bring in their style. When you're writing Sins of Sinister, things like which I just read, and I love Sinister is one of my I gravitate towards villains. I don't know why, but
it's the beard.
Do you have input on character design there somewhat? Like, I want Sinister to look like this, or I want him to look like that, or do you just write it and then the editor says to the artist, this is what we're going to go with, or something of that nature?
It's complicated. I mean, honestly, like most of it is if it's a major new character, they'll probably be designed before they get to the page. Like, it's quite often so I'm just tilting my head thinking about, like, specifically Sins of Sinister. Quite regularly, obviously, there's a lot of new looks in there, and I'm like, like the red diamond Emma Frost. That's the kind of a living gem of Cyttorak. That's kind of the visual as an Emma Frost, but a living red diamond, and she's a weird Dune-esque space queen. You know what I mean? So like I've given the vibe, and that's kind of like you're trying to inspire people is the kind of the thing. So quite yes is the answer. Yeah, you're probably pitching a visual, and especially when you're writing a story because you're thinking about what it's going to look like, and especially for Marvel, you're regularly working with different artists. Like, so you're not just working with one person. So in some ways, I probably have to be slightly more forceful, I guess, is what I'm saying. As in, we need it like this because I'm the person who's trying to connect multiple books together. But individually, if it's something in somebody's individual book, I go, here's what I want, but go for it. Because this is one of my beliefs as a comic writer is that you can't force artists to do anything. You can, not in a bad way. They have the power. They're the person with the pen. What you can do is inspire them. And you may try to give something that they want to do. And if they want to do it, the work will be better, And it's like, and occasionally, like, there's been artists who have been really good artists, and we just haven't clicked. That, and I don't mean that as a bad thing. It's just our aesthetics just slightly didn't work, and the work was professional. We both, it's good stuff, but at the same time, it's not singing because there's something about the way we think isn't 100%, and that's the nature of collaboration. It doesn't always work, and when it on the front, it occasionally, quite regularly, it makes it bigger than what either of you could do alone.
Very cool. I have one follow-up question on something you said. This upcoming project, is it called TPF? Is that what you're currently calling it?
I'm calling it Project TPF, which is the acronym.
Yeah, of course.
Project TPF. Like, I've got a newsletter, which I sort of. I've started talking a little bit about it. Trust, I haven't said anything apart from it's called Project TPF.
Are you able to say who you're collaborating with on that?
I don't want to. It'll be. I don't want to say anything else about it yet. You know what I mean? Like, I'm deliberately not saving the name. Sorry, not saying the name because it makes the announcement more fun.
Yeah, of course.
You know what I mean? Like, Jake Jesús, it is really. It's just the ta-da of it all.
Totally understand.
If I'm working on OGN as well at the moment, that's the other thing. Like, the artist's like halfway through that, so which is nice. As soon as they get off from you, I'm going to send my newsletter for this week and then go through like the 40 pages of the OGN that's been done. So it's like it's nice, and it's like I'm coming to the end of my time at Marvel for this, because it's just fun. Like I tend to, I go in and out of places. It's like, oh, I had fun. I think I've had enough. I'm going to do something else now. But I'm really excited about doing create our own stuff again. You know what I mean? Like, it's been a while since I've just done a pure burst of like my nonsense. I mean, apart from the RPG, which is still my nonsense.
That's awesome. We're excited for that because, for us, we're more of an indie type podcast. We like the indie books. We read a lot of indie books. Don't get me wrong. I love Marvel. I've been reading the Hulk, and I've been reading your X-Men and your Sins of Sinister, and I've even since Avengers vs. X-Men and stuff like that. But at the core, we like the independent, we like the creator. We talk to creators and stuff a lot. That's why we ask about craft and, collaborating and things of that nature. So very excited to see what you got coming.
Thank you. I am too. I think it feels, something feels good. Like, it's one of the things, my wife, I was going to do another book immediately after Die finished, but it was COVID, and my wife basically said, be gentle on yourself, don't bother. And it's like, I don't have to do another create our own book, and she was right. And so I've had that while sit and stew and consider stuff, and I'm really come back, and I'm excited. I'm really, really kind of like if I start telling people about the story, I just tell the whole thing, including obviously my close friends, I'm saying, but like my all the big twists, and then this happens in issue 12, and then all that kind of stuff.
It's great that you're that passionate about it, though. That's what I really like. Before we move on to the next segment, you mentioned something, and I'm going to go ahead and shout it out for you as well. You mentioned that you have a newsletter, and I believe that would be your Kieron Gillen .substack.com. Is that? It's not.
Substack. I used to be on Substack, and I've still got it there as a forwarding page. I'm on Button Down. Of course, Substack being a bigger site, of course, immediately Google's up more.
Button Down. Well, I'm glad I clarified, because we are not on your. Because you said you were mentioning in a newsletter. I was like, I don't remember that. Because I thought we were on his Substack, but so I got to go over to your Button Down and sign up for that now.
Yeah, I am thinking about moving back to Substack for various reasons.
Well, we're on
but,
both
like,
now. We're going to be on both. So wherever you want to be. Awesome. Okay, everybody out there, if you want to get more of the updates when Project TPF is officially announced, I think you're going to have to go over to Kieron's Button Down and subscribe to that, which sounds interesting anyway, right? It sounds fun.
Definitely.
All right, let's move on to our final segment of the show.
Speculation.
That's right, the speculation segment where we like to talk about something that we consider either underrated, undervalued, or something that may be going up in value in the near future. We have a lot of collectors that listen to this show and a lot of people that, occasionally in order to buy something new, they got to sell something old. So we like to talk about that. And that is, let's see here. Jesus, according to my notes here, you get to go first.
This is the first time I've gone first. This time. So I have a very, very cool one that's very relevant right now. And, I thought you were going to talk about this, Jake, because and it's funny hearing Kieron talk because, the way you talk about collaborating, you say it's not singing, right? So I'm going to go with Phonogram #1 from 2006. Kieron's first, and you did, stuff in the magazines too, which that's also going to be collectible for me at some point, going back and collecting those PlayStation magazines with those small comics that you had in there. But Phonogram is your first creator-owned, your first comic with Jamie in Image Comics. It's about music, right? Like it has a lot of music and it tied into it. It's black and white. You thought it was going to be a zine, and then you pitched it and somebody asked you, why aren't you pitching it to us? And then you pitched it to them and it became an Image book. So just the first ones are always cool. The first ones are always unique. The first ones are always different. Just the story of how you got it. I think you said you wrote it in 2003. It didn't come out to 2006, I believe. Is that correct?
I think that's right. Like that? Yeah.
So
like the first part anyway, yeah. The other part I wrote a bit later, but yeah, I think I wrote that just to. Actually, that's not true. I wrote a demo script to Phonogram to show to Jamie to talk him into it, and then he said yes, and then I wrote the first issue pretty shortly afterwards.
Yeah, so that the very nexus of the beginning of the collaboration between you and Jamie, that to me it's going to be a collector's item going forward. And also it's just, it has to do with music. And Jake, the reason I say is like, I like music. Don't get me wrong. I have, my favorite bands and things of that nature, but I wouldn't say I'm an audiophile or anything like that. I haven't collected vinyls and records. It does speak to me. Certain songs speak to me. Certain singers speak to me. But I don't have, I think, what you, Kieron, and what Jake has. Because Jake was talking about records on our last episode, or one of our last episodes. And it's just very interesting to hear how you speak of music and you're weaving it with comics and how you collaborate. So for me, that's a book that I'm getting. I'm going to try to get as high grade as possible on it because it's your first work, your first creative work. And in my opinion, based on what we've already seen from your career, and you mentioned it too, you could stop now and, you're golden, but you obviously you have more plans in the future. It's just gonna skyrocket in value, in my opinion. So that's what I have for this week. Phonogram 2006, Kieron and Jamie, their first creator-owned at Image.
Yeah. We're so proud of that book. It's like kind of like the first Phonogram's raw, but like it's still it's recognizably us, and like it was explicitly written, that whole thing. If this is the only company we get to do, we're fine. We can never do like it was very clear, a big burst of what we wanted to do, and what we wanted to do maybe not being smart, but it was definitely like what we wanted to do.
Well, man, I wanted to ask you from a creator standpoint, because you had Warren Ellis say that it was like one of the top or unique books of 2006, right? Like a must read, basically.
Yeah, it was cool.
How was that feeling to kind of get that from him?
It's like Warren's obviously, like, everything's happened to Warren since makes everything very complicated in that upsetting, actually. Obviously, like I was friends with Warren, so everything is upsetting, and just tarnishes that whole kind of memory. Like it's very hard for me to think about that period and those kind of things. But like it was good to be recognized as something interesting. Like because it's especially that time with Image. Like I was chatting to someone about this recently. That Image books weren't for the way we think of an Image book now wasn't then. Back then, it was much more thought like just Spawn, or like the idea of being these kind of superhero books. So the idea of this weird black and white book about indie records from the UK, that wasn't what the idea of what an Image book was. So it's quite interesting to think about the period being a change of like how Image was perceived. Obviously, Casanova was there, and Dr. Warren Fell was there. Obviously, Rick's early work was there. Jerry was doing some stuff there. Hickman was about to come in, and that was like a kind of like a very different sort of space for Image. But like, it was like, I think back, and it's been so long ago now. The kind of the weird insanity of my brain there. I definitely in my head, all I thought about was Us versus Casanova, as in which is the best book. And it's so funny because like Matt was already the Marvel's golden boy, and I of course was just doing one book, but in my head these are the only two books that existed, and he was Reed Richards, I was Doctor Doom in that metaphor.
That's awesome.
It was not honestly like it was a weird minor cult, not minor, it was a cult book, the people who liked Phonogram got tattoos, and that was kind of like incredibly powerful. Like I've met people through Phonogram who are incredibly good friends. I feel incredibly lucky.
Nice.
I mean, it was your hard work. You did it, man, and you saw it and you put it out there, and that's awesome. So thank you for that as well, man. Thank you.
Making friends, bonding through music, games, and stories, right? Like that's what
the comics.
Yeah, that's what weaves people together, which is really great. That's how Jesus and I became friends, comic books. So that's kind of the nature of the world. All right, well, Jesus, thank you for bringing that up. I realized that I could absolutely talk to Kieron about 100% of everything that he's written, and unfortunately, I would just talk the entire time, and that's not good for anybody. So I wanted to limit it to just a few of his works that really, really touched me deep. So that's why I let you take that one. Kieron, this is a segment that based on your what you said about collecting, this may not necessarily be your forte as far as that goes. But I don't mean to presume. You're giving me a look now like, hey, I know what I'm doing over here. You know what? I'm going to shut up and let you go ahead and talk. What do you got for speculation, Kieron?
Speculation? I say, I show for what's undervalued. I'm not like. If I was genuinely speculating, I'd probably. I'm saying this, and I don't want to say. I was about to say I would always be buying Dr. Aphra stuff now. And I say that because if I say that, people are going to assume that I know something, and I genuinely don't know anything. But if Black Santana's been in a TV show, she strikes me as somewhat more commercially accessible than a enormous.
So what you're saying is, just to clarify, you don't know anything.
I really don't know. That's why I was about to say, it's like genuine sort of situations where like these. I can't say that, but I can't.
But I was going to ask you if you're aware of what the first issue appearance of Dr. Aphra is going for these days.
Not recent. I looked at it a while back because I think it's like I'm not great at actually following the speculation. As in, I'm sort of one distancer, and it's one of those things where like I admire a distance, and occasionally stuff gets back to me. And obviously, I try to do good variants. That's what the main thing is.
Yep.
I liked controlling what I can, which is basically all the way through Wick, Div, and Die. It was basically really good artists, additive covers that are really meaningful to the book. That was with Wick Div. It was like, let's treat them like pop stars. And Die, that was more Stephanie's creature, because Stephanie, of course, being a cover artist, wanted to get a favorite cover artist doing stuff for her book. And she has obviously got great taste. But like, no, how is Dr. Aphra going?
Well, now if you're talking about a graded comic in a 9.8, on eBay you can get them anywhere from about $200 to $250. But if that's for the first cover, but if you are going with the 1 in 25 variant, the La Roca variant, that one sells. Granted, I don't know what its sold prices are, but it's going for over $1,000 on eBay.
Oh wow!
The listing I'm looking at right now is 1,495. I'm guessing since they have make an offer that's probably not what sales are going for, but it's over 200 for the original cover and definitely in that $1,000 ballpark for that variant. Here's another variant of the same variant. That's $1,700. So they're quite valuable. People are really into this character. And I think that's also a testament to just how well the character was created and written. So congrats to you on that. Do you happen to have a few just stored in the back there?
Yeah.
I do
There's some
actually.
comps. There's some comps you have back there. We can give you our PO box. No,
I genuinely am bad. I generally get rid of most of my comps. I give them away, etc. But there was definitely when the Star Wars ones. It was like when that number. I thought I'm going to put these in a box and keep them somewhere. Like it strikes me as this feels like a thing I should probably keep.
Good for you for
secretly,
doing
not in
that.
my house.
See, he is good with speculation.
He knew. Star Wars is on the cover. Well, that's awesome. I'm glad you brought it up. That wasn't what my speculation was going to be, but there was no way we were getting out of this segment without talking about Dr. Aphra. So, or this show for that matter. The thing that I'm going to speculate on is going to go with the theme of what I've talked about throughout this entire episode, and it's going to be kind of RPG. It's going to be D&D. So something that I'm speculating on, something that I believe everybody should just sort of be on the lookout for from a value perspective. Now, it's not necessarily cheap by any means anymore, but there's still things that you can find. And that is the original Dungeons and Dragons books and sets, collector's editions. If you go back, there's... people talk very often about, oh my God, in my grandmother's bureau, we found a copy of Tech 27 or so, right? Like these old 1940s and 50s comics. People are like, oh yeah, I found a Showcase 4 just sitting at like, there's some very big comics just found in drawers. And those are from 60, 70, 80 years ago. But what if we are talking about original books and games from the 80s, the 70s and the 80s? Some of the original Dungeons and Dragons, even Dungeon Master guides, things like that. Those have a lot of value, and truly, those are likely sitting in. And not necessarily my parents, but my parents did grow up in the 70s. They were in the right age bracket. Unfortunately, they were not gamers. They didn't care. They were probably the type of people that would have poked fun at me as a kid if I was a kid at the same time as them, I think. My dad definitely would have. But he's nice now though. Don't worry about it. But these are the type of books that we should be discovering again, going back, looking, because if you do go to eBay, you can find, some of the original Dungeons and Dragons sets and stuff. They are not cheap. They're going for hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. And like I said, I think that these are part of the next generation of rare collectibles that you may think that, paying a few $100s for something like that now is insane. Well, what happens 50 years from now when that world, we were talking earlier about cons where thousands of people showing up on a Saturday night somewhere in Omaha, Nebraska, there's 50 or 60 people showing up at a comic shop to play RPG games, right? There is a very large group of people, and they're, what they're doing when they show up, they're spawning, right? They're just getting more people to show up. They're getting more fans of this culture. It's just not as far along as comics are, right? It came a little bit later. So what I'm saying is my speculation is go look, dig through the old bins, dig through your parents' old collectible, books and things like that. They may not have the real rare comic books, right? Hulk 181 may not be sitting in your grandparents' attic, but maybe one of these are, because they did sell quite a few and they're out there. So that's my speculation.
The
Good
actually,
one.
addition to that, and I agree. Coming back from Gen Con, they have the Gen Con auctions. And apparently, one of the big things of this auction was they had the TSR financial records, something like 1982 or 1983, something like that. And they had 3 copies of the actual, just the really boring accountancy. Like, it's
Oh,
nothing
wow.
interesting. It's just TSR who were publishing D&D at the time. Yeah, and they went apparently big, as in, like, I don't know how big, but like much more than it should be for some boring financial records of no interest to anyone, really. And just because it's TSR, this is, and there's not and there's not many of them.
Yeah. Well,
So, like,
financial
like,
records.
oh, no,
Yeah.
like that kind of classic D&D, that classic early kind of hobby stuff, especially like, how old it is now, how that. I think that's definitely a space. And plus, I go like check stuff on eBay for like occasionally, like for buying games straight out of print or like manuals.
Yep.
They're not inexpensive sometimes.
Yeah.
So like there's definitely a space there. In fact, I was listening to Ken and Robin's podcast recently, and they were saying these TSR belt buckles they used to do for the shows.
Yeah.
And now they're in demand with collectors enough that there's now knockoff knockoff people making them. And they've actually printed them and stuff like that. So like if there's enough for forgeries to exist, it implies there's money there.
Wow.
Yeah, and that makes the originals go up even more in value because you want the original, not the knockoff for the most part.
That's why they do reprints, right? That's why they do reprints. Makes the value of the originals go up. Okay, that honestly, that is going to bring us to a close on this episode of Spec Tales. Everybody out there listening, thank you so much for joining us. Kieron, this was 100% an absolute pleasure. It lived up to every fantasy I had about talking to you. If only we had more time. But in this case, thank you so much for joining us. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been delightful.
Jesus, thanks to you too. You may have only gotten 4 tater tots, but it was a banner day for you.
It's the most I've ever gotten, so I'll take the dub.
Exactly. All right. Thanks again, everybody. Please come back next week where we will have another wonderful guest. Probably not as great as Kieron, but who can be, right? No offense to whoever is next. I don't know who's actually next on our list. Thanks, everybody. Catch you next week.